Hey there, folks. Welcome to the live stream. Just getting my audio set up. Give me a shout in the comments, in the live comments, if you can hear me. I have a history of getting my audio wrong, so a little bit of reassurance would be welcome. There's about a 20-second delay in YouTube in terms of what I can see in the chat, just FYI, so I'll keep an eye on it. But be patient with me, and if lots of people start chatting, don't be shy, and you can re-ask your question. If you're watching this later, welcome as well. Please give it a watch. We generally go about 45 minutes to an hour. Halfway through, we go from doing neurofeedback, which we're going to start with, into some topics where we talk about a little more lecture style a little bit. And thanks, Fred and Elliot and everyone else for the audio checks and for participating. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. You can see my cat is lurking in the background, a la Barry Sturman. She's channeling some good neurofeedback vibes. So let me turn off the title. There we go. And today we're going to talk about motivation and avoidance, but as usual, I'm going to do a little bit of neurofeedback first. So let me set myself up with a couple of protocols. And these are going to be frontal protocols. A lot of the stuff that works best for motivation and for aversion, task avoidance, is a frontal protocol approach. Not completely, and I'll get into why later on today in this live stream. But you can think about frontal protocols as being pretty important for this process. So I'm going to start with an F7. An F7 is about here on the soft spot on the temple, in line with the hat line, about an inch up from that bone landmark, right on the midpoint in some ways between FP1, F7, and then we have T3 on the left. So I'm going to do F7A1. I'm going to inhibit some theta, so we're setting up to do 4 to 7. There we go. Pardon me while I look off camera because my setup computer is sitting right here to my left. So we'll do 4 to 7. Actually, I'll do 4 to 10, and I'll explain why once it's running. And we're going to reward a faster frequency. So let's just type this in. So let's do, we'll do 15 hertz, and then we'll do 18 hertz. 18 hertz. There we go. And then we'll do 24 to 36 as a high inhibit. Okay. And then I'm just going to run that for a few minutes because another thing about frontal protocols is they're a little bit delayed sometimes. Like you get next day effects or even second day effects. And they can also be a little bit less predictable than the average centerline protocol. So we're going to do a little bit of a short session and a couple of things. I have one setup in Eager, which is a set of channels and frequencies, and one run, which is the time. I'm going to go add a couple more setups and runs. So here's a run. And we're going to do a right hemisphere protocol for another 6 minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now let's take that and change it to a setup. There it is. Make it a setup. Cool. And for this one, I want to do a protocol that is on FT8, frontotemporal. So you can see F8 here on the head plot. If you tap this little 1010 button, it shows you all of the intermediate sites. And my screen's a bit cramped because I'm on a large resolution screen and I've increased the font size a tiny bit. And so it's kind of cramped, but you can see you can still tap on FT8. Turn those off just for visible clarity. And we're going to do a 2 to, I don't know, let's say, we'll do 4 to 7. Again, theta will be the inhibit. We're going to do an alpha reward. So this is 7 to 10 hertz on the right-hand side at FT8. And then we're going to do 20 to 32. So it's kind of a wider, fast beta inhibit on the upper right. Now, because I added these protocol segments manually, the second one, it doesn't have auto goals set up. In Eager, you have to set up the thresholds, the percentages, and how often you're sampling or changing the thresholds or resetting them. And so I'm in the second setup. I'm going to tap auto goal settings. And then I'm going to look down the left here, and you can see that it's set to 20% for the inhibit, I like to go 25. So I'm going to raise that to 25. And then it says the reward is 70. I actually like 65. So I'm dropping that down to 65. And then the high inhibit is 20%, which means pass it 80% of the time. I'm actually going to drop that to 15. And then we have the time to auto goal to reset goals automatically. I'm going to set that to 30 seconds. And then tap this little button to make sure that it picks up the 30-second change, and then hit OK. All right, so there's my protocol. And I have my two segments, an F7 and an FT8. So the next thing to do is to put some wires on. So let me pull over my OBS screen so I can see what you guys are chatting about. Hey, Rick. Hey, Elliot. Hey, Fred. Thanks for showing up, guys. Appreciate it. So I'm doing a couple protocols today, an F7 followed by an FT8. I'm curious while I'm getting set up, who here has tried F7 for any of you guys who played around with this? And if you have, what'd you think? And the same thing for either F8 or FT8. Have you tried these left and right protocols? And do you remember what they did? So what I'm doing now is I'm prepping an ear clip, got a little bucket of paste and some wires. And I'm just taking a little bit of this electrolyte paste and coating the silver interior surface of the wire with it. Hang that off one of my ears. The same thing with another clip. There we go. There we go. Cool. And the right hemisphere, or the right ear, A1 is left, A2 is right. That's what the names mean in those locations in the setup screen. So I'm going to take my left ear. So both ears and my scalp, I'm plugging into an EEG amplifier right here. This is one of the old Whiz amps. And the red and black sockets make up the first channel. So I'm taking the left ear, because this is F7 minus A1, and plug into the black socket. I'm taking my right ear, which is a ground wire in this case, and plugging it into the green socket. And then I'm going to take a scalp wire once it's in place, and that will go into the red socket. So you can see what I have here for wiring, where this first socket is going to my scalp, second socket goes to my left ear, third socket is the ground that goes to my right ear. So let's put a little bit of paste on. And I'm going to put some paste first on my F7 itself, because if you ever put Electrode on bare skin, be it the side of your head or up, if you're bald like me, it's always good to put paste to paste. That'll prevent it from sliding right off the moment it gets warm. And I'm just kind of feeling where my tackiness was so I can sink that roughly in the same place. Cool. All right, so I'm pretty set up. Hey, Quellen, welcome. And Dave, I think we were talking today, Dave. Couldn't resist geeking out, huh? That's awesome. Nice to see you, Quellen. Been a while. Rick, you've tried the F7. Cool. Do you remember what it did? Maybe not. For those of you who tried a lot of protocols, it can get kind of vague after a while. All right, so here's my amp set up. I got 3 wires touching my head, and they're measuring my left frontal area. Lateral frontal area on the left at F7 is the location. Elliot says F7CZ seems to make him irritable of the day. However, on a different day when he did a frontal series, including F3 and F7, FP1, good results. Yeah, what I might recommend, Elliot, is not using the vertex, not using CZ as the reference when you're that far over to the left side. When you're all the way over to F7, it's going to be harder to pick up a sort of reference signal that contains some of the same background. The vertex is almost too far away with different generators. So for the reasons we reference, you might want to use F7 against the left ear like I'm doing and try that. Rick's checking the portal. Cool, cool, cool. All right, let's see. So I'm just going to start. And Eager has this habit of taking over the screen and the mouse once we start. So let me move my screening or streaming software. There we go. And here we go. All right, run. And what game should I pick? Oh, I don't know. I think we're just going to use something simple. Let's use Island. Cool. So Island's a very simple game. The blue bar at the bottom represents the amount of the reward brainwave, the left side here, the 15 to 18 hertz. You can see the eager screen popping up. Signals are initializing. Also, the wire is obviously next to my forehead, and that's going to create a lot of artifact. You can see I just touched the wires, now they're all over the place. So anytime you're next to the face and you're moving or talking or looking, it's going to be a little bit noisy. It's noisier than it should be. I'm going to scale this up a little bit. And eager, if you go up in scale, it adds a more aggressive high pass filter onto the display. So at 20 microvolts, it allows the signal to drift up and down a lot more, but at 50 microvolts, it constrains it a little bit, at least visually. So I've selected the top band. I'm going to hit F9, which will give me the F7, F8, and F9. So F9 selected the scale box. I'm going to hit plus, and my signals get a little smaller at 50. I'm going to hit enter, which brings me over to my artifact rejection threshold, which is set to 100 right now. I'm going to go up a little bit. You can see my signals are cleaning up. It's good to let your signals settle down for a minute or two. There we go. So now I have a somewhat low amplitude signal because I've scaled it up so much. It looks kind of low amp, but it's not. Going to let things settle down for a little while because all my moving and talking is causing trouble. There we go. Good enough. I'm going to scale it back down. It looks like I'm touching the wires too much because it seems to be popping or reacting to every single thing I'm doing, which EEG is a little bit robust. It should be able to ignore a tiny bit of movement, but right now it's all over the place. There we go. So Elliot's asking, do scale changes only affect the presentation or do they affect the feedback calculations? They do affect the feedback calculations. The feedback is performed, the calculations are performed on the filtered bands, right? So we have the top band here, which right now is a raw signal with a bit of noise in it. But as we look down here, we have the 4 to 10 band. You can see next to the pink box, it says 4 to 10. So 4 to 10 is affectionately dubbed thalpha, which is theta and alpha together. So theta is like 4 to 7, and the alpha, at least low alpha, is 4 to 10, or rather 8 to 10 for slow alpha. And then we have 15 to 18, which is a regular beta. And then we have 24 to 36, which is a faster beta. So I've got kind of a noisy signal here. It's kind of hot in my house, and it looks like the wire is popping with my pulse a little bit. So I'm going to train anyways. And if I wasn't talking or moving, it'd be fine, but it'll be a little bit iffy. So, but I do want to answer your question, Elliot. The filtered bands, what the scale does is that it affects the step size of the adjustment when you're auto thresholding or thresholding. So how much it changes towards the threshold, how many microvolts, is a fraction of the scale. So if you scale really small, everything's tiny, then there's very small adjustments. Actually, sorry, very large adjustments. But if you scale very, very small so that all the waves are big, then there's very, very small adjustments as you go. So let me kick off my session here, my first 6 minutes, even though it's noisy. Oh, F5. There we go. And then F11 to auto scale. Cool. Oh, that's too loud. Cool. I have a lot of wires here. That's why it's probably hard to get good signals. I'm sitting here with cameras and microphones and EEG and all kinds of things. Let me turn the audio down just a little bit further. Okay, I don't want the beeps of the game to really overwhelm the discussion I'm trying to have with you guys. So please let me know if the beeps are too loud, if they're overwhelming my voice. I want them to kind of be in the background, and I'll turn them down a little more. Yeah, so as long as I'm not moving too much, I get a pretty stable signal. It is pretty noisy though, isn't it? So you can see on this game, we have 3 boxes, the blue box in the middle of the screen, is the reward brain wave, the 15 to 18 hertz. And let me widen out my artifact reject because I'm just clipping out way too much here. There we go. Cool. Let me scale this a little differently. So you can see I'm not getting much of an EEG visible on the screen. I'm getting mostly the noise showing because it's so high amplitude. There is EEG in the raw signal, though. It's kind of a good thing to see your EEG when you're training to know what's happening with the signal. So I'm going to function F9 again, which gives me my scale box. And I'm actually going to go down a little bit again, just so I can see the signal. There we go. Now I can see my EEG. Cool. So Elliot's asking, the auto thresholding still respects the settings regardless of scale. Oh, like the percentages? Yeah. So you're still trying to aim for 75% or 25% or whatever it is, but the size of the step to get there is altered. So you're seeing how robust the training is. As I'm talking, I'm adding too much noise to train. When I stop talking, the screen recovers. In this case, the blue is my beta waves. So when those are wider, I'm getting beeps. And the pink box is my theta waves, my thalpha. So when that goes down, I'm getting beeps. Okay, so Rick's done some, let's see, FP1 and F3CZ, motivation. Yep, F3CZ, C3, and C4, motivated. Yeah, so that left front's a good area to work. So you're giving us some testimonial here, Rick, that left front does produce a little motivation. You've noticed that. And Elliot noticed that too. So it can really produce some benefits for some people. Oh, and you got some sleepiness during the F3CZ. That just means you're hard training if you get some tiredness during a beta protocol. You're not really supposed to just talk the whole time when you're training either. This is sort of suboptimal. So Rick was motivated to do chores after doing FP1 to F3CZ. Yeah. The person that taught me the most in neurofeedback is somebody named Larry Hirschberg, who's recently retired, but he ran a center on the East Coast for a long time called the Neurodevelopment Center that focuses on autism and ADHD, a lot of different autistic spectrum phenomena. And he told me his name for the FP1 protocol was the desk clearing protocol because it tends to drive up people's motivation to get into things, which we'll talk about. I think doing frontal training was the wrong thing for me to plan when I'm trying to talk because it's just too much noise. So for that second segment, even though it says FT8, I think I'm going to switch it to a PZ because that's nowhere near the front of my face, and that will be a stable signal. So Fred's asking, what are my thoughts on deep brain reorientation? It's interesting. I'm not super familiar. I have a sense of what it is, but I'm not familiar enough probably to comment. So in spite of all this noise, in spite of me only training every 50% of the time I'm moving and not getting a good signal, I'm actually feeling this protocol. I'm somewhat sensitive to neurofeedback. I feel most of them, but I'm feeling like I've exerted and getting a little tingle of energy lifting. So I'm getting the sort of beta surge in my left front area that I was hoping for. So here it is. We're almost done this segment. Another 10 seconds or so. So Rick's asking, the F3 can make him irritable too. Yep. Curious why that is from a cognitive perspective. Okay, we've stopped the first half. I'm going to switch my wire. And again, I was planning to do T8, and I'll explain what that is in a second. But for just the purposes of being able to show you a live signal while training instead of all the movement, I'm just going to do an PZ protocol. So the back vertex, which is alpha, also useful to train at alpha. And you may have noticed I just ripped the wire off. I'm just moving it. And as I stabilize it, it will calm down on the screen, or it should. There we go. So now I'm getting a signal that should not respond to the same motion. Oh, my amp looks like it's in a weird mode, huh? Maybe that's why. Maybe my amp is, the grounding is gone. There we go. Let's see if that settles it. Cool. Let me just change my scaling. So F9 plus, gonna get some big waves. I might get some alpha back here because I'm tired. I'm gonna expand it. There we go. I'm gonna back down if you can scale one more time. So again, F9, there we go, and then back to 50. 50 looks pretty good. So we getting stable signals? Pretty much. Yeah, it's a little bit noisy today. I wonder why. My amp looks okay. It's nice and stable. Maybe because I'm sweating so much. That's probably it. I'm going to kick this off anyways. Got to do a little bit of auto thresholding, F9, F11, F9 back and forth. It's changing the size of the filtered bands a little bit. There we go. Yeah, Elliot, I am kind of sensitive. Every protocol I can kind of tell the difference within about 5 or 10 minutes. And Elliot, as an aside, maybe you can be jealous. That's fine. Part of what I did for my dissertation work was look at the real-time evoked potential to the neurofeedback event. So looking at how the brain was reacting, when it was reacting to the frequencies that were being rewarded. And most people don't feel neurofeedback for 3 to 5 sessions. So I did a monitoring with a 64-channel cap for 5 days of neurofeedback and was expecting to see the emergent effect of neurofeedback show up at some point in there, as it was being felt. But actually what shows up for everybody pretty much who's not doing a sham protocol in this study is within the first 5 or 10 minutes, the first time you're doing neurofeedback, you can see the brain reacting with an evoked potential in the frequency that's being rewarded. So it's a really interesting effect, and the brain picks it up almost instantly. And for whatever reason, I can feel that or hear that effect, so to speak. All right, now that my signals are sensitive or stabilized, I'm going to kick off my session. So F5. Oh, F5 again, actually, for the one F5 toggles it to the next session or segment. The next F5 begins. There we go. Cool. So now I'm doing an alpha protocol. And again, I was going to do it at FT8, but I'm doing it in the back because it's more stable. And you can see that I'm rewarding, or rather inhibiting 4 to 7, rewarding 7 to 10, so a low alpha, and then inhibiting 20 to 32. So, pretty classic alpha protocol where you're doing some alpha. Since I am doing alpha, might as well show you a fun trick. Let's see if I can make it happen. So my eyes are open, obviously, and there's a wire on the back midline of my head over the parietal midline, the posterior cingulate. And you're seeing a lot of EEG that's kind of low amplitude. Let me actually make it 20 microvolts so you can see it better before I show you my trick. So that's 50 microvolts, that's 20. I'll let it stabilize again. Okay, cool. Okay, so you can see what happened. And yeah, my amplifier is actually in a weird mode. There it goes. My amp may have crashed. Oh, there it goes. If you leave the whiz amps open, actually it has crashed. Let me restart the eager session just because that'll help me. Just unplugging the amp, plugging it back in, and just that will reset the amp. The amp has a virtual ground in the whiz amps, and sometimes it can lose that information, and so it tends to falter. So my amp is still jumping around. We'll see if it works. One of the reasons my amplifier is a little flaky is that I tend to grab the janky hardware that's old and has been used 1,000 times, and that's what I bring home. So I think I might be finding the end of a duty cycle of an amp in real time here. It probably has been used for thousands and thousands of EEGs. Let's see. Oh, it's an HEG mode too for some reason. Interesting. Yeah, so this amp is apparently on its last legs. This old amp. It's probably like 15 years old. I'm getting decent signals some of the time, so I'm just gonna go for it. But you're understanding right now why doing neurofeedback can be a little flaky. If you're doing it with peak brain, we tend to have people in real time support roles for you so that you can jump right in and get some help. But if we saw this amp doing this, we would ask you to swap it out with a fresh one because I think my amplifier's on its last legs right now. That's okay. Anyways, I'm going to show you my trick, which is after I stop talking, the signals will calm down. And then when I close my eyes, you should see lots of alpha in the top signal, the raw signal. So, Rick, a task avoidance tendency can be seen in a brain map. I'll talk to you about that in a second. But let me see as I go to the left of the screen, close my eyes for a few seconds and be quiet. Let's see what happens. Okay, now let's look. So I got a cleaner signal. I guess I'm not seeing a lot of clean EEG though. So it's happening, but I guess I'm scaled up enough to avoid the noise that I'm hiding the alpha. So I'm just going to run it, and then I will talk to you guys about motivation and procrastination and that kind of stuff, task avoidance in a second. Let's see. Let me scale down a little bit. I'm not sure what's happening with my amplifier. The amplifier is behaving as if one of the wires isn't well connected. That's sort of what happens when you don't have good signals, like the signals aren't stable. It's usually because something's not connected. Maybe it is. Maybe that's all it was. Let's see. Oh yeah, I guess my ear clip was falling off and I didn't feel it. See how hard it is to troubleshoot sometimes? I'm looking at complicated things, and all it was the loose ear clip just sliding off as I was sweating. So now we're getting a lot more legit EEG. Let me scale it back to, let's see. Let's do F9. Scale it down to 12. Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting a lot better EEG. A lot more legit, so to speak. Now I'm going to clip out some of those blinks and things. Yeah, right. Reboot all the things. Unplug stuff and plug it back in. It always works. My first real serious high-tech boss, a guy named Aaron Abend. Well, actually, was it Aaron? No, it wasn't. It was Kingsley Idahan, the CEO of OpenLink Software. Kingsley would say, 9 times out of 10, the answer's on the screen, and the 10th time, something's not plugged in. And I have never lost that sense of troubleshooting. I mean, now you see him as cranking through rewards because I have real EEG and it's getting measured. The fluctuating waves are getting picked up, which is great. Cool. So we will talk in a second, Rick, about the brain signatures of procrastination, motivation, task avoidance. You know, a few weeks ago, I did a live stream on just motivation. And I talked a lot about the different aspects of the brain that were involved and how they all communicate, and went kind of high level in over a bunch of stuff, a bunch of biohacks as well as the physiology. And today I wanted to talk a little more about one aspect of perhaps procrastination, and maybe the core feature. And it's this perspective on the brain that looks at the motivation for the approach system or getting into stuff, and the motivation for the avoid system or protecting yourself from effort and from, things being annoying. So I'll let you, I'm doing beta training. That's why I'm feeling it. You can see I haven't switched to beta. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Function F4. There we go. Now I'm back to alpha training. So if you ever lose your place in eager and start training the wrong way, like I was just doing, training up some beta in the back, you can hit F4 and it toggles to the next available segment, but it also avoids the timers. So in about 5 minutes, I'll kill this manually because I've just voided the timer switching to the second segment. So to cut to the chase a tiny bit for you folks who were live on the live stream and asking questions, a lot of the neurofeedback approach would be focused on the frontal lobes, but we have to think about the central cortex as well, the C3 and C4, because those are actually core features of planning of behavior and voluntary activity. So you really can think about the C3 and C4 as drivers of the phenomena, and then the more lateralized and frontal areas like F7 and F3 on the left, and F4 and F8 on the right as being really the core aspects of approach on the left and avoid on the right. And there are other components that are involved. Again, C3 is more task stabilization or mode stabilization. So once you're doing something, you keep doing it, even if it's boring. And the one on the right, C4, is more about task supervision or behavioral supervision. It knows if you're on the right road, if you're actually turning appropriately and following the directions as you wish. So you often have to go after central areas, the precentral C3 and C4 areas, as well as frontal, the more central frontal areas, F7 and F3 and 4, or the more lateralized temple areas, F7 and F8. So some combination of that makes some sense. For some people, the approach versus avoid balance is not about the frontal areas or the central areas, though. It ends up being sort of a problem with selecting from among competing demands on the thing you want to do. So it's important that you look at a brain map and come up with a perspective for each person on what might be in the way. So, all right, some more questions here or some observations Rick is sharing. Post neurofeedback, your task avoidance tends to go up when tasks get repetitive over months and positive motivation towards goal gets weaker. It's interesting. So your motivation goes down when things get repetitive. I would also wonder if they get less challenging, because there's something called the Yerkes-Dodson curve, where a little bit of stress means we respond better, a lot more stress, we respond even more stress, we respond less well, even more stress, even less well. Boredom can be a kind of stress. So maybe you're running into the kind of environment where the tedium is actually, wearing you out and you don't have enough to engage with in some ways after you lose that task, activity, the novelty goes away perhaps. It could be that you also, the intensity, you're getting good at the task, Rick, so the intensity dips. And the Yerkes-Dodson curve is that sort of curve where arousal has this inverted U relationship with performance. But for basically, not every kind of task follows that straightforward inverted U. Basically, complex tasks, a little bit of thinking do. But simple things, you can go up for a long time just by getting more intense. So if you're finding it hard to keep engaging with tasks, figure out if you need to change your activation level, even if it's not about the task. Playing loud music might get you doing the thing you're doing because it's waking up your brain, for instance. All right, where am I in time? About 3 minutes into this. I'm going to let it go another 2 minutes or so, and then we'll be done for the neurofeedback. But you can see I spent like 10 minutes just mucking about with the signal quality, trying to get it working, and didn't quite get it perfect in the first half, and only really realized what the problem was in the second half. So neurofeedback is a little bit of a finicky process. If you work with Peak Brain, we will spend the first couple of weeks doing live sessions with you, teaching you things as you go and helping you not make mistakes. And then we have real-time coaches standing by to jump in and support you if you need with protocols. Yeah, Rick, exactly. You should jump into a little bit of stress, and you might not need to shake up the environment too much to find yourself more motivated for repetitive things. Maybe just changing your body's activity level. Going for a quick walk might actually make a huge change in how motivated you feel to engage with the boring thing because you've gotten some plasticity bubbling by walking briefly. All right, 1 more minute of my neurofeedback. So if anyone has questions on the protocol, this alpha protocol I'm running, just let me know. And even though I'm not doing an FT8 like I planned, the PZ protocol, the alpha at PZ, is actually one that can bring up a lot of motivation, because training up alpha at PZ can bring up your speed of processing, make your mind kind of quick, interested, bring up your mood, which can also help with motivation. If thinking's easy and thinking is powerful, it's something you generally want to do. All right, I'm gonna close my eyes for 20 seconds and bring up my alpha. Yeah, you can see little runs of it. The signal's pretty low amplitude still, so it's not coming out hugely. If my apartment wasn't 85 degrees Fahrenheit, I think it'd be a lot better. Sweat can really destroy quality VEG. This is good enough to train. I'm actually starting to feel an alpha effect, but it's right on the edge of being good enough to train. So if I was troubleshooting with you, I would have you add more paste and do some other stuff. All right, that's it for my session. So let me switch my scenes. There we go. And let me open up my slideshow. There we go. Cool. All right, so now I'm going to unplug myself while I look at your questions and answer any other stuff. So Rick's saying some tendency to use a lot of stimulants, maybe coffee and nicotine. Yeah, I mean, that will actually help some of us stay on task and perform better, honestly. So it's fine if it works for you to some extent, but you have to be careful with some of those reinforcers because they do have some downsides. So pull off my wires. Yeah, that's hot, Rick. 97 degrees. I'm sure you know all about paste warming up and electrodes melting and falling off your head. That happens pretty easily. So I'm just using a bit of tissue to wipe off any residual paste. So I'm not talking to you guys with big white blobs on my head. Something about Mary style for the rest of the talk today. We are going to talk about motivation and task avoidance, which is a cool thing. And let me flip things around here for just a second. Okay, so let me get out of my one screen so I can see the live stream. There we go. And there's the image slideshow. Cool, cool, cool. All right, so today we're talking about motivation and task avoidance a little bit, and general avoidance, but really in the context of motivation, it's the approach versus the avoid perspective on what you're doing. So Elliot's letting us know that he sometimes goes to the grocery store and discovers the paste still. I've had people leave my office with like wires hanging off their head and discover it later too. So you're not the only one, Elliot. All right, so what is motivation and avoidance? What are we talking about here? Well, essentially, you know what motivation is, and avoidance is the opposite of that. It's this resistance you feel to getting into it for whatever reason, good or bad. I'm not saying motivation or lack thereof is only universally good. We have to manage our output, and there's a certain amount of protection of our resources that we have to deal with. And so we tend to have this system where the left front is an approach and the right front's an avoid, and it can be very difficult to manage those voluntarily if they're strong and activated on their own. And I'll get into in a minute what that looks like. But I wanted to sort of point out that we have to really look at the regulatory basics first. If you are not sleeping, dealing with that first is kind of necessary to then have the resources with which to motivate. And you also need to have some control over your activation level. Just like that Yerkes Dodson curve I mentioned earlier, if you're super anxious, super activated, you're not going to be effective at sitting down and trying to do the thing. Instead, you're going to be pulled into a more survival reactive mode, and slowing down your mind enough to focus and to move through tasks will be really hard if you're super activated. And then executive function, control over your attention, where left side is the stabilizer and the right side is the supervisor. These are super important areas to know about and to take some control over. And I've given you some basic interventions here that I'll get into a little more in this talk on different pages. But for fatigue support, you got to hack your circadian rhythm, hack your sleep cycle. And that's all about a morning routine. And I'll cover more on that in a moment. Also, control your anxiety. There's all kinds of things I've talked about in these biohacking, neurofeedback and chill talks. I think last week might have been anxiety. And I gave several different practical strategies with breathing, with maybe some eye or gaze direction. Also talked a little bit about exercise and movement. And here I'm talking about HRV biofeedback, also a super useful thing for controlling our stress response. HRV, or the beat-to-beat timing of the heart, is sort of the integrator between the sympathetic arousal, fight, flee, fight kind of thing, and the parasympathetic rest and repair mode. So controlling your heart rate variability through biofeedback is a process that you can get into, and that gives you more control over balancing at the activation level that you want to be at. Fred is telling us, just FYI, his protocol has been making him more calm, but he needs to push more for motivation. Fred, thanks for that. What that means is we should probably add some protocols for you for motivation. Some more left front, and or maybe bring in some HEG. But you and I can talk about that, and I'll build out a little more your plan for you. See if we can't bring up some more motivation, assuming you want that. The calmness sounds nice, but it sounds like we could maybe light a fire under you too, and that might be nice as well. So give it some thought. You can get back to me directly. So after you guys have a foundation, after your sleep is sorted and your executive is feeling decent and your stress response is feeling moderate, then you want to build in other strategies. And to do that, let's first talk about what's going on. So motivation is a process of cognitive control. You're controlling what your mind is doing and what your behavior is doing, what you're valuing in the moment, and what you're deciding to get done in terms of the next thing you're acting on. So these are really important things to manage. And we have an unlimited number of things we have to do at all times, pretty much. So you always have to be selecting from among competing demands on time, on attention, and on behavior. So we have this system set up where the left front is the approach system, a kid in the porch going, "Hi, world is so cool. Yay, I want it." And a grumpy old man on the right front going, "No, it's going to suck. Leave me alone. I don't want it. Too much. Leave me alone." So we balance the approach versus the avoid based on how safe and interested, rested, excited we might feel. And so there's some cognitive perspective around it. There's some basic resource management. There's some safety aspects. So this is why executive function and anxiety both are important things to think about, not just the frontal balance, the left versus right. So, oh, now I'm feeling my neurofeedback, by the way. I've got a little bit of a buzz going on. I think it was just the alpha training I did, and I'm feeling a little tiny bit sped up. So I did do about 1.5 minutes of beta training at my PZ, at my back midline, which is not a place we usually train beta. It usually takes more than a few minutes to start creating much of an effect, but I think I may have gotten a little beta and a little fast alpha because I feel just a little bit like I had coffee right now. Also, visually, the world is a tiny bit brighter because I must have been tapping into visual areas with that alpha and beta training. And so I'm seeing things a tiny bit more brightly right now, which is an effect that does happen to some people with neurofeedback, as they kind of see better. They think they're seeing better. It's really attending better, but it's a visual phenomena subjectively. Hey, it's Jay. Hey, Jay, showing up 18 months after we stopped training. Your twin's reduction of depression symptoms has maintained. Gorgeous. Love it. But the decrease in ADHD has faded a few months. Any thoughts? Yeah. Executive function stuff is scaffolded by sleep. So make sure that your twin is hacking his sleep appropriately. It could be that a little bit more neurofeedback is needed to knock it all, to lock it all down. I'd recommend first starting with some sleep hacking, some basic, good morning routine, and also some meditation, 10, 15 minutes a morning. My classic morning routine that you guys all know who are on this live stream is you get up early, and before you eat and before you become sedentary and before you start stressing, you do a small little micro practice, a minimal viable practice, MVP. And the MVP I like is to get up no later than 1 hour after dawn. And I like getting up much earlier myself. So really early is cool, but 1 hour after dawn is as late as you ever should get up, or sunrise really. And when you first get up, after you do your morning ablutions, hit the can and brush your teeth, then do 10 minutes of something to wake up the entire body, which can be going for a short walk or doing some sun salutations or some other yoga or stretching. Something like that is a very, very powerful circadian rhythm setter. And if you use the morning light and the morning activity, these sort of stack and you got a really strong circadian cue about what time of day it is. And this can really help with the body locking back into more efficient sleep. So Rick is asking, let's see. Oh, VJ. Hey, VJ. Happens to me. VJ, do you mean that you're getting a little more calm and could use some more motivation? I think that's what you mean. You've also been meditating like it's your job, VJ. So maybe that has something to do with how chill you are right now. Rick is asking, is it possible to increase motivation, consistency, and performance despite lack of external stress? Yeah, absolutely. You can decide to turn on a focus even when things are boring and find a way to follow through on that, to point the car in a direction and have it follow, have it do what you say. This will take more work on the left front, on C3, maybe F7, maybe FP1. So you can do more work on that and lock it in. You can also do bilateral precentral work. So C3 and C4 done at the same time. It's a very powerful way to bring up all aspects of executive function, and it tends to support motivation quite a bit if you're combining it with some sessions throughout the week of some, more frontal areas, also with these central areas. It can really stack in a nice way. VJ's getting some visuals. Yep, some cool visuals as well. You guys are having some great experiences. Most of you on this channel who are talking publicly about this. We've had some good training effects over the years. All right, so cognitive control is about selecting from these competing, from among these competing resources or competing demands. And so if you, one very basic example, if you were at a stop sign or a walk signal, and the walk signal popped up walk, and you started to step out into the street at the same time you hear a car screeching around the corner, you have to decide, do I step forward or do I not? That's a response conflict. And this left front area of the brain is driven to approach. It wants to get into it. It's not motivated per se, but it wants to get into it. And the right front is driven to avoid and protect you from effort and things being annoying and difficult. And it's driven to do that. Difficulties in motivation, difficulties in task avoidance are not a right front dominance the way that some of the literature used to think. And they're not a true frontal asymmetry. What they are is a conflict between resolving the approach motivation and the avoid motivation. And chances are, if you're deeply task averse, then you have an awful lot of sort of valid phenomena that are in that task avoidance. Things are difficult, you don't know where to start, things are overwhelming. And you may also have a fairly good amount of task approach where you're interested, you want, you should, really important stuff. But it's not so much that you're in an avoidant mode, it's that you can't resolve the competing demands of approach versus avoid. That is what, in some ways, a lack of motivation is. It's the inability to resolve the two flavors of motivation we have, to get into it and to pull back. That's where motivation lives. And the failure of that is where task avoidance starts to creep in. And the place that actually resolves that conflict is the anterior cingulate. It's the project manager that holds things in our mind. So that's a very important place to get control over as well, especially for somebody who is a little obsessive, then working on the anterior cingulate, FZ, as well as the F7, F8s, or the F3, F4s, and the C3, C4s. These can become really crucial in giving you some stability of executive function. But yeah, Rick, your question was very valid. Those are things we can want and should want as goals, to the ability to turn on our brain and sit down and work for an hour, hour and a half on things that are not that exciting because we decided we should. And being able to do that semi-voluntarily and to manage those resources is a really important thing for a lot of people's success. So I'd encourage you to pursue that as a goal. Okay, let's see other questions. Love it. Rick's having some struggles right now with thinking of training with us guys again. Yeah, if your motivation isn't on point, Rick, you can do some more training. Again, start with circadian hacking. Maybe your sleep. I know you. I know your sleep gets a little wonky. So maybe first work on morning routines, then add some meditation. You can do it while doing your morning routine. And then if you're still struggling and you're not getting good sleep, maybe give us a shout. You can, of course, always do neurofeedback with us. We'll support you. But sometimes just supporting our brains with a bit of behavior change. It reactivates resources that are a little hard to access. So you might get somewhere just by changing your habits, shifting up your sleep schedule, focusing on a morning routine for 7 days straight. That may actually do a lot for you. Okay, let's see. VJ, PIRHEG seems to cover F7, F8, 3, and 4 areas, and that's why neurofeedback can target that. HEG, PIRHEG, kind of is a broad field of focus. It's probably not getting a lot of F7, F8. It's probably getting mostly like FP1, FP2, and FPZ. However, it's calling for an awful lot of energy change. For folks that aren't aware, HEG measures blood flow or heat, really. And PIRHEG is passive cameras that measure waves of heat coming off your brain, and you can yoke it to a signal to get some feedback on it. But it's really getting a signal that is metabolically fairly taxing. And so what that means is when you're calling for waves of heat, when you're bringing more metabolic flow to the frontal lobe, you're kind of bringing it up everywhere because the amount of blood flow you have to move is pretty extreme to create heat changes. So it's a fairly significant amount of movement of heat. And if you look at some of the infrared photography that Jeff Carmen's done, Jeff Carmen invented the HEG device, the PIR was invented by Dr. Jeffrey Carmen. He did a lot of work with migraineurs showing infrared camera photography before and after a short session of HEG. And you can see a huge change all throughout the front part of the head, but even the sides of the head and the back of the head have changes when you move that much blood around. So I'm not sure that HEG is all that specific, the PIR variant, but if it is, then we're getting more central phenomena tapped and a little bit less of the lateral is my guess, although it is a bit more global. VJ saying you cracked motivation in a way that he needed. Awesome, awesome. Oh, you mean right now I'm explaining motivation to you in a way you needed? Cool. My work here is done. That's it. No, we'll keep going for a few more minutes, but all right. Rick's doing a night shift now. See, I knew it. I knew your sleep might be a little off. My hunch is your circadian rhythm is out of sync with your day wake cycle, Rick. And so your brain is not 100% sure when to wake up right now. So I would dial in some biohacking on the sleep. And my hunch is that'll do a lot for your get up and go. You'll sleep more deeply when you're asleep. You'll wake up more cleanly when you're awake, and motivation should happen. Hey, Bonnie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the kind words. All right, so these are all the areas in the slide we've been talking about, right? The anterior cingulated FZ, C3 and C4 for stabilization and supervision, respectively, and then those more lateralized areas. You can also go to FP1, which is the desk cleaning protocol, but that's more about the boost of energy and a bit less about the approach systems. Those are a bit more lateralized. Okay, so also this is not just about tweaking your brain. Motivation's a mindset thing. A lot of it is, how we contextualize the work we have to do. Boring things that lead to exciting goals are exciting. Exciting things that lead to boring goals, not that exciting. So remembering why you're doing something and having a plan to do something that you're serving those goals of yours in the future will help an awful lot. You can also sort of change a language around this. Do I have another slide on that? Let's see. Frontal asymmetry, we talked about. Yeah, so here we go. Mindset and becomes can and get to, not must and should. So it's, I get to do this thing, or I can do this thing now. Not, I have to do this thing now. That can really help a lot. Just that sort of verbalization for yourself to shift yourself out of a sense of burden, which is the right being activated, and into a sense of approach and interest and curiosity, which is this left front, more activating. So train it. Just train it behaviorally. If you notice yourself being negative, resistant, feeling overwhelmed, judging something as likely, negative, I don't want to do that. Examine that. And maybe you can bring in a little bit of that front left corner of the brain, that happy kid looking for things, just by asking for it, asking your brain to bring up a little bit of that interest, that curiosity, and let go of some of that braced against things being annoying and hard. We also have a phenomena, or a strategy rather, called mindful procrastination. If you want to go back and watch my procrastination live stream from a couple of weeks ago, or go to the website and you can see my article on it. But essentially, mindful procrastination is the process of noticing the aspects of our procrastination, the sense of resistance or task avoidance, the sense of, oh, I have to do that thing. And if you start noticing that, that is its own exertion, that is its own expenditure of energy. So if you notice you're doing that, and then the same thing keeps occupying your resistance, that there's that thing, and it keeps happening, that can build up a lot of resistance. We're then bracing really hard against doing something. So instead of bracing hard against it and pushing back and trying not to think about it, just note that it's happening. And then when it happens again 20 minutes later, note that again. And just kind of notice what kind of energy is going into not doing it, to pushing back, to worrying about it. And then perhaps that awareness of the effort you're spending resisting it can be kind of flipped into a little bit of behavior, a little bit of action towards it, a task or two, the first action, the next action, something. And then you'll notice if you manage to turn that resistance into a little bit of action, you'll notice you feel very, very different about the same action that you have just finished than you felt before you actually engage with it. And examine that and tie that back into the sense of resistance you felt. That will over time erode and dissolve the strong cognitive strategies we have for pushing back against doing things now. So mindful procrastination is a big, big deal. Sleep hacking with a morning routine. I mentioned getting up early, going for a walk. Also fasting before bed, huge for allowing yourself to sleep more deeply at night. Planning and scoping projects, that's all about finding the next actions and the blockers, and also knowing, again, what the tasks are and why you're doing them. What larger thing do they serve? And then you can time block with GTD and Pomodoro, some techniques of getting things done, and Pomodoro technique for some time blocking. Sorry, this slide should have had some indents. Every second one or third one was going to be indented, but it's not now, so you can just imagine. So those are, I think, are most of my slides. Do I have another one? Let's see. Where to learn more? Well, Peak Brain Institute is our neurofeedback center. Many of you on this live stream who are chatting have worked with us. My hunch is a couple of you are setting yourselves up right now in training as we're chatting, which is cool. Or certainly you're sharing your experiences, which is really cool. Really appreciate that. So folks that have not worked with us, come check us out. We'll help you learn to do neurofeedback. We'll send you equipment. You can do it fully from home. And we use the same sort of high-end neurofeedback you might use in a clinic with QEEGs and everything else. So if you want some neurofeedback, come find us. There's also a special running where brain maps are only $250, and that includes a repeat in our offices at least. So you can come get access to that deal. Also, for a free call, you can book a call with me at Calendly, Dr. Hill 1 for initial consults. They're free. So give me a shout if you want to talk about your brain or what neurofeedback or biohacking can do for you. And then lastly, this channel, YouTube/Dr. Hill. So if you guys are on the chat still hanging out, please do me a favor and go find a video to like and comment. That's not just this one. The algorithm really loves comments. And while I certainly am being fed by your comments right now, the live stream comments don't count as much as comments done later on videos for some reason. So if you could go goose the algorithm and tickle it so that it knows we exist, that'd be great for other videos. Let me answer some more questions though before we break for the night. Elliot, did we talk about FT8? Yeah, so I was going to use FT8 minus A2, and you can use it to T4. FT8, so F8 can really get into some resistance and some avoidance, but FT8 further back, about halfway to T4, the theory is that taps into the insula. That taps deeper under the lateral part of the frontal lobe. We have the insular cortex underneath it, basically. And that's more about body awareness, as well as consuming things, like eating things. But there's some evidence that if you train this right area a bit at FT8 instead of F8, it creates a change in oppositionality. It dissolves a sense of resistance when it's really strong. So if I was feeling negative or overwhelmed or depressed, F8 or F4 might be better. But if I'm feeling like angry and resistant and frustrated, like a little problem child, then FT8 becomes more my target for doing right side training. It's an alpha protocol. And then left side's beta. And that I generally stay more on the edge here. So F7 is mood and motivation. FP1 is more strong, light a fire under you. F3, either reference to A1 or F3 to CZ, can be a nice mix of mood, language, motivation, focus, kind of all at once. So I'm a big fan of left front quadrant, and the left front quadrant's a bit safer to train than the right front quadrant. Right front is a little bit more unique, person to person, a bit less predictable. And in general, the more frontal you go, the less predictable the results are and the more delayed they might be. So if you're doing FP1 and it's your first time trying it and you don't notice much out of it, give it a day. See if you clean the house tomorrow. Or F7 or F3. Those left front ones can be a little delayed. So, all right, other questions? Let's see. Yeah, Jay, happy to answer that question. You got it. Bonnie's asking what's Pomodoro and GTD. So GTD, David Allen, a book called Getting Things Done, is a way of doing task management where you break everything out into projects. And then within those projects, you really focus on two concepts. Blockers, things you can't do yet because you need other stuff to be done, and the next action, the next thing that you can do. And the other big concept of GTD is that you tend to use one system for keeping notes. You don't keep notes everywhere. You find one set of Kanban boards or note cards or an app on your phone, and you rely on it religiously. And you dump any thoughts about, I got to do that thing into that one framework as soon as you have the thought. So you are not spending time holding things in your mind that you're not doing. So that'll make you less likely to push back against them and resist them using, sort of amotivated and procrastinatory things. If you're not burning cycles just by holding things in your mind, because there's a certain tendency of, got to do it. Not gonna do it right now, but that can lead very much into, I don't want to do it now. So this is a way around that. And then Pomodoro is time blocking. You do 25-minute sprints on one task or one project, 5-minute enforced break. If you're feeling ambitious, if you're good at Pomodoros, where you stack up 3 or 4 sprints in a row and then take a longer break, that's the sort of style of Pomodoro technique. The more advanced ways do 45-minute, 15-minute blocks. I like those sometimes. And I like to work in about 90-minute blocks overall. So I either do 3 Pomodoros that are 25-5, or I do 2 Pomodoros that are 45-15. And, then I go and do something different and come back later on in the day and I stack a couple Pomodoros up as well. So I have a lot of work that's very person-centric, where my schedule is not just sitting down and working. And so I tend to do those burst time block work really early and really late in the day. And for me, without doing one thing for that 30, 40 minutes, it would be really hard to get anything done if I stayed in sort of multitasking, client responsive, person-centric mode when I'm trying to, do projects. So I intentionally move out of that mode into a time blocking mode for Pomodoros. Yeah, GTD is Getting Things Done. Exactly. David Allen, you should buy the book. It's an old book now, but it's like $10 and it's a classic. Let's see what else we got. 40 years of Zen protocol. Yeah, you can do 40 years of Zen with us, style protocols, alpha, theta protocols. We can also do a lot more than just the 5 days of alpha, theta. If you want to do serious alpha synchrony or, big work in developing meditation ability, then you'd want to do more than 5 days, which is the 40 years of Zen program. Our programs can include any type of neurofeedback you wish, pretty much. And we can do alpha synchrony and alpha work. We also have meditation teachers to help kind of double down on skills as you go. Some of you on this live stream have experience working with our teachers and doing neurofeedback, which can be a nice way to stack things. Yeah, Bonnie, this is going to be, this will be reposted. There's a live stream section on my YouTube that has all of the old ones. So about an hour after this is finished, it shows the live stream and you can replay it and watch the comments pop up as well. So it will be there tomorrow for folks. I have a couple mentees who have their morning coffee and listen to my live stream from the night before while they're puttering. So hi guys. All right, other questions here. Let's see today. Do we have Pomodoro time block examples on the website? I have a social post that I posted about a month ago, Bonnie, which gave 4 strategies for biohacking procrastination. And I do have the Pomodoro broken out there. There's also an article on my website, on the andrewhillphd.com website, on procrastination. And so I'll make sure that that link shows up in the description, the show notes for this live stream. But you can go and look on that procrastination article to see some of the same neuroanatomy we talked about today, but also some more of those deeper techniques like the Pomodoro are broken out a little more on that article for you as well. So, all right, any other questions? Best protocols for improving mental math? Oh, Radar Ashwood, that's a great question. Depends a little bit on why the math isn't great. You may have issues with speed of processing, which means you're working probably more at PZ to bring up faster alpha, or you might want to work on the C sites to improve your deep sleep. You could have bad math because you're anxious under test environments or something, and now you're working on the singulates, you can switch gears more rapidly. You could actually have a primary math issue, dyscalculia, acalculia, and that's over the right parietal area. So a bit lower than P4 is usually where the math areas are. But if you're really truly dyscalculic or acalculic, then you might actually have 2 language areas and no math area, at which point just goosing the math area isn't going to do very much to your math. And so you work around it with speed of processing, the ability to have good concentration and working memory, and then you just kind of brute force your way through the math problems if you are truly, absent of those resources. Jay's asking, are there any protocols that can specifically help with time estimation? That's a great question. I don't know. I have had clients improve their sense of time a lot. I don't know if it's sort of like a side effect of what we're doing or if it's a core effect. What I might recommend, Jay, if you're trying to really improve your sense of timing for music or athletic performance, I might recommend a C3A1, C4A2 dual. And I might recommend cranking up the reward frequencies a tiny bit until they feel like you can't keep your eyes open in the session. And what that'll do is it'll bring up the intrahemispheric communication in beta between C3 and C4, which should mean that you're sort of perceptually more aware as well as motorically more able to execute rapidly. I've used that approach with a lot of athletes. I have a couple baseball players who are getting a little older in their years, and hitting a baseball might be the number one hardest athletic task or physical task a human body ever has to do. It requires most things at once, reaction time, perception, movement. And I've also experienced this myself with music, with drumming. Training up that combination dual, it seems to improve the ability to perceive time because you can kind of move more slowly internally, less reactively. But it also seems to allow one to slice up time into smaller increments. Doing a lot of pushy, beta pushed up a little bit, C3A1, C4A2, to me kind of feels a little bit like Adderall, while, right afterwards when the protocol lands and rebounds. And when it lands hard, that C3A1, C4A2, you feel tired in the session. An hour or two after you finish, you wake up into strong, clear focus. And that tends to linger for a while. And then you've hit the frequency perfectly if you also sleep really well. If you don't sleep that well, got to adjust the frequency. But if you felt kind of fatigued in the session, woke up afterwards, felt really clear afterwards, slept great, keep doing that. And a handful of sessions in, your mind should be running quicker, which means you should be able to hold more things in your mind and move through time with more control. So give that a shot. I'm not sure what you'll notice, but that's what I would do. All right. Other questions? Bonnie's saying, great, thanks. Have to go look for them. Cool. Too jet lagged tonight. Yeah, you can watch this tomorrow. No problem. So, all right, guys. Well, where are we on time? Let's see. Looks like we're just past an hour. Appreciate that. Any final questions? Why don't you dump them in the chat and I'll answer before we break. VJ's asking, how would we do that for a person who tends to be sensitive to higher frequencies? I would do one side at a time, VJ, because you're already probably, since you run pretty fast, you probably have good interhemispheric communication. People that are very sensitive to neurofeedback tend to be people that have really strong interhemispheric communication. There's lots of ways you can become sensitive, but the most common sort of natural way is when the two hemispheres are talking a lot. So any perturbation of those causes a lot of change and you feel it. That includes people that are lefty, that are neuroatypical in some way, they're kind of quirky brains. We tend to feel things in neurofeedback very, very quickly because the corpus callosum's thicker in lefties and people with atypical laterality. So any change in that traffic, we can kind of feel fast. So, ooh, more questions. Great. Jay's asking more on the lines of estimating how long it takes me to finish a work project to clean a room. Basic time blindness. I don't know. I came across a tool yesterday called Goblin Tools where you can type in the task and it uses AI to estimate for you how long it's going to take. Maybe start there and train yourself getting external scaffolding to estimate time and then gradually get better at doing it yourself. My hunch is you'll learn what particular tasks start to take and that will then lock in a bit better. Let's see. Radar Ashwood has a question. What are the benefits of monopolar squash protocols when you train down the whole EEG? Now, one nitpick, there's no such thing as a monopolar. Even if one wire's in the head and one's on an ear, it's still a bipolar signal. You're still subtracting to get the signal. But I get your meaning. One wire in the head, and then you're doing a squash or a down training where you're inhibiting all the bands. I do that all the time. You may be in a case where you don't want to reward something. If somebody's got lots of fast alpha, let's say, maybe a trauma history, but they've also got some OCD features, you're going to want to squash the singulates and not bring up alpha. So you may want to just do an inhibit on theta, beta, and fast beta. It's fine. Down training, that's not a monopolar, so to speak, but the logic holds either way. And down training tends to be a little gentler. It's less of an ask for the brain than adding a reward band. So folks that are easily activated, folks that are hypersensitive to training, folks that are heavily over-aroused, autistic folks that are stimming and screaming and can't settle their nervous system. You can do an awful lot of great stuff with simple down training protocols. And it's, again, a fairly gentle way to train. You don't get strong effects, but you can get effects that you notice, and then you can build protocols on top of that might boost things you need. So it's a nice way to train. Okay, let's see. Thanks, guys, for saying goodbye. I'll see you all in the next one. And there's some type A, type B stuff, Rick. I might cover that a little bit different. I would say that type A people are more left front driven, but they're also usually obsessive. So that's more about the front midline being on than, type A is rigidity. It's holding things in your mind as a strategy more than anything else, I think. So I'm not sure if I think type A is motivated so much as it is controlled, perhaps. And type B might be less controlled, less driven by that need to apprehend all the information. Okay, and then last question, VJ, when would you do delta training? Basically never. Training delta is usually a bad thing. There are times you might want to train it, like maybe if you can never stay awake in alpha theta, then you might want to add a delta inhibit so you can kind of prevent the delta from surging while you're on the edge of sleep. But generally training down delta can do really weird things and can screw with the stability of tissue. You would never train it up. That can create a seizure. But I stay away from delta because if you train the things that are in the way of the regulation of the tissue, the thetas, the alphas, and the betas, you get changes in other bands. So the delta is usually very excessive in fatigue and concussion and brain fog, but you almost never have to train it directly. You can train the betas and the alphas and the thetas, and the delta recovers all on its own. So delta is an interesting and important thing to think about, but I try to avoid manipulating it because it's not really the right way to go after resetting the system, basically. It's a kind of ineffective thing to train. All right, guys, thanks so much for your help tonight, helping me stay not bored. Hope you got something out of these slides and some of our discussion on the approach versus the avoid system. Think about that concept, motivational conflict. The approach system and the avoid system themselves are in conflict. It's not about avoidance. It's about an inability to prioritize the real desire to avoid and the real desire to approach. Now you know that they're gently fighting it out. Perhaps you can steer them in the direction that you want. All right, folks, have a lovely evening, and next day or wherever you happen to be, I'll talk to you all soon, and take care of those brains, and we'll see you next week on something more basic. I might either do meditation or sleep. We'll see what shows up, but until next week, talk to you soon. Take care.